I have the feeling that engagement and also all these pilot innovation projects is like doing embroidery. You do a stitch here, you do a stitch there, you do a stitch here, you do a stitch there, and you need to keep going. And just at the end, you're going to have the full picture, and that, like, your solution will look like something. But the small stitches you do, like the engagement that you do here, also not only the engagement with the citizens, but also with the different stakeholders, with your social services, with the energy services, all these small connections, sometimes they take time. They take words will be tired about it, but then at the end you are going to see that it composes the full picture and that these small contributions make it work.
Today on Energ Ethic, we travel to the places where cities learn, adapt, and sometimes surprise us. Our guest today is Dr. Eduardo Blanco, a project manager at Energy Cities and the driving force behind the Power Up project, which has been working with 5 European municipalities to rethink how communities support people in energy poverty. Eduardo has moved across disciplines and continents. He began his career in Brazil, working on urban development, waste system, and environmental planning. He later pursued advanced studies in France, focusing on sustainable mobility, urban ecology, and regenerative design. This experience shaped his belief that cities become fairer when technical solutions meet social needs. Eduardo is a doer by nature. He likes ideas that become useful objects and strategies that become practical support. So his work blends engineering, design, and community engagement with quite a rare sense of care. So he managed projects on energy poverty, clean energy district, and the role of social sciences in the Green Deal. This placed him at the center of Europe's conversation on trust, vulnerability, and local action. So in this episode, we explore how cities can build the right conditions for sufficiency and dignity. We will discuss social energy players, the everyday realities of households in energy poverty and hardship, and the lessons that travel from Brazil to Europe. Eduardo brings a fresh, practical, and deeply human view on what an equitable transition should look like. Eduardo, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Marine. It's a pleasure to be around.
Thank you so much, Eduardo. So you've been describing yourself as a doer in a world that often gets stuck in theory. So where does this drive to materialize ideas come from, whether in cities or through your own projects at home?
Yeah, sure. It's a very good question. I think a lot of this came from my experience working with cities, actually. Back in Brazil, when I started to work as like urban planning, environmental engineer, lots of my work was on planning, exactly, doing paperwork, doing planning, strategy, long-term plannings. And I was very disappointed to see them staying there in the paper, in a drawer, and not really getting into action. I think plans are definitely needed and necessary to set the long-term strategy, but they need to be dynamic, and they need to have also this dimension of testing, piloting, going on the ground, doing things and seeing what works, what does not work. So a lot came to this, and this was also what moved me to working more pilot projects as Power Up that we're going to talk a bit later that has really concrete implementation on the ground. And then also, from a more personal perspective, my mom has always in her life doing handcraft entire life. And then I think it also reflects on me. I really like to do things and to work with my hands and to create something. So like from visual arts to any kind that I can use my hands to do, I'm always doing. And I think this being a doer really reflects who I am, at least at this moment.
Yeah, that's great. Also because, I mean, at the end of the day, the cities are exactly where we are evolving as human beings. Like there are a lot of things around us that at the end of the day, they shape us as well. So it influences our daily lives. And now we are not, of course, physically in the same space, but in a way, there's nothing more tangible than the city and its building and the fact that it's a composition of a lot of things that people have been doing and are doing every day. So that's a very nice, circling back.
Yeah, sure. Because actually, it's a two-way thing. Because we change the space every day. Like even if you don't think about it, we change the space continually, and the space changes as well. So how we perceive this space that we have been changing, it changes us. So it's very interesting. And I think also cities and changing the space, the way we use this space, is something that everyone can relate to. Everyone is the majority today of the population is an urban dweller. They live in the urban space. They have an argument. They have an opinion about the energy, about the mobility, about the public space. For me, it's a very topic that I really like and enjoy working with.
And you have crossed many disciplines, right, in your job, in your studies as well. So you worked on environmental engineering, on sustainable mobility, on urban ecology, on biomimicry. So it's a lot of doing, a lot of things, a lot of very tangible, sometimes a lot of observation, and then bringing them back into something like to perspective and so on. So what unifies your way of looking at cities and their blind spots? What do you see when you see a city?
Yeah, I see a complex system, actually. I think it's very, very particular. And sometimes when we work in like European projects, in projects in general, you see things very clustered. Like I'm working now on energy, I'm working now on mobility, I'm working now on nature and biodiversity.
Yeah.
But everything is connected in a city. Impossible to... It's okay for the human mind and for our Cartesian way of doing and thinking. Sometimes we need to separate, but we can't forget that things are related. And I think this is, also what came across my experience in my works, really seeing things with all their synergies that they have and the trade-offs. Because if you do a mobility project, if you do like sustainable energy project, you put a PV in an area, in a green area, there is an impact in the nature, there is a trade-off, there is something that you need to think, there is going to impact the public space, there will impact life of people.
Yeah.
So everything is connected, and sometimes we just narrow in these clusters and we don't manage to, or we don't have time also, or skills sometimes, to see these synergies and these links, but they're there. And I think this is the magic side of cities and the work with urban areas in general. But then also in my perspective, I think all this work is like also quite like being a doctor, a health doctor. Because the same thing, you need to do a diagnostic first. You need to understand which is the condition of your patient, which are the problems, which are their strengths, how their immune system is working, and then to do something informed by reality, informed by decision, by data, by the real context that's there. And there's no one single answer. Every urban area, every city is unique as every patient. So really, I think this also is very important point that I have been seeing in the work I'm doing up to now.
Yeah, and that's interesting because it's not only each city that is unique, but also each neighborhood within the cities that, I mean, you can have vast differences between a neighborhood and another. And so I've been working with the New European Bauhaus facility for a few months now, and there is this strong neighborhood approach that I find extremely interesting because, in the energy field or in the housing field, until very recently, we were talking about the energy consumption of a household, like the retrofitting of one building. And now the urban level understands that it's not really working. It has to be something that brings more socialization, and somehow the neighborhood is also a great place to do that. What is your understanding of the neighborhoods approach? And maybe you can kind of drive us into your difference of perspective, because you come from Sao Paulo and it's very different from what you see also here in Europe, right?
Yeah, definitely. I really like the Neighbourhood-scale. All my PhD was around neighborhood transition, neighborhood level. I think that, the neighborhoods, I think it's a good challenge for us now. We know now how to manage buildings, how to make buildings sustainable, regenerative, net zero, and everything. But the neighborhood, it helps us to bridge a bit the scale, to go to a scale that enlarge the impact, and also it's easier to integrate all the social dimensions and economic dimensions, because the definitions of neighborhood varies. Like you can have any kind of definitions, but for me it's an area that also has a very specific social dynamics. The social fabric is working in a specific way, so it's not only geographical but it's also social. It has also the cultural dimension, the historic dimension of the neighborhood. So the neighborhood bring this perspective that also I worked a lot with nature-based solutions, biodiversity. it's also a scale that's more relevant for this for the intervention on biodiversity, because biodiversity, a single tree will not help much, even if it helps, but the more structural change is much more interesting, and then you catalyze effects that are more tangible. So I think that this direction that European Bauhaus is going through neighborhoods is very interesting. And then, the reality of neighborhoods in Brazil, Europe is very, very, very different. Not only the neighborhoods, but the social reality as well. I think scale, from perspective of scale, like the size, are very different. Usually neighborhoods in Brazil, they are big, even sometimes they are more homogeneous. You have like more distinction between areas that are more residential, more industrial, more commercial, but the size is huge, and the dynamics, only thinking about public transportation, economy, it's very, very different, because I have also lots of informal economy still taking place in these places. So it changed completely the shape. So that's also why I think you need really to understand the reality of the neighborhood to be able to propose something there that works for the people living there.
That's really so interesting, and that makes me think of this kind of 15-minute city. It used to be like very trendy a couple of years ago. I don't know if it's as trendy now, but this kind of whatever you can do within 15 to 20 minutes, walking, cycling, etc., that becomes your reality, right? It's a very interesting approach, especially when you take the time to live your city, right? It's it might be different when you are always rushing and looking after time and running from places to places. But whenever you can feel and experience your city, what you explore first is usually your own neighborhood, and that makes it relatable, and you see and you witness the change. So as a human being, it becomes really what shapes your daily experience, right? And what you just mentioned about nature-based solution and biodiversity, etc., I find it extremely interesting when we talk about climate adaptation and the fact that climate change is hitting cities way more than it is hitting the countryside. The difference of temperature can be 7 to 10 degrees between cities and the countryside. So having a neighborhood approach to buildings, to planting trees, to the construction of bicycle paths, etc., is also very relevant. And the parks for instance, are something usually people take a lot of pride of, and they are profoundly in their neighborhoods. It's like our community park almost. But I'm talking from a Western European perspective. Is it something that you have analyzed in other contexts in Europe?
Yeah. I think the 15-minute city is an amazing concept, but also at the same time that I think it's great, I think it's very European-centered now. It works for Europe. But then, I think all these topics apply. It can be applied everywhere. But the challenge is where we are starting from. It's very different from one area to another. I think in Europe, in general, today we are more or less homogeneous on this. But then when you go to South America, or even when you go to other European countries, territories, not countries, like French Guiana or Reunion Island, that are French lands that are not in the European continent, the reality is also quite different. If you think, for example, even where I come from in Brazil, if you walk 15 minutes from my house, we are going to be in the middle of houses, and that's it. We're still going to be in the same area. There's nothing to do besides going to the house of someone else. So it needs to require a more structural change in the way of planning, in the way of doing, in promoting the diversity of the space. So I think the concept is great, but the challenge, where we are starting to reach this target, changes a lot from one country to another, and also from one smaller city to one bigger city. For example, Paris is great in the diversity of spaces, of uses, of being able to do things within the closest of your home, like having green spaces, having services, having public administration. But when now I live in Lille, the situation is different. I don't have a green space 15 minutes from my place walking. I have to take my bike 15 minutes. Okay, it's still 15 minutes, but it requires a bit more effort. So different size of city, different types of resources, challenges where we are starting, their starting point is definitely different. And I think it also applies to energy poverty, energy transition, energy portability.
Yeah, that's a very nice loop, and I love that you live in Lille. That's where I studied, and I saw the
Ah,
transformation at the beginning of the years 2000. And I haven't had the opportunity to come back in years, but would love to see how it has evolved, because there were a lot of actions and being undertaken. I moved there when Lille became European capital of culture, and that was quite an interesting experiment for the city to reinvent itself. So I think that's also worth mentioning, that there are really some cool initiative at European level that really brings some new and fresh air into city planning. I think it's also something that we may tend to forget, that this kind of people gathering to change, to help change things. That's very, very inspiring. So that's also exactly what you've been doing with the project Power Up that we just mentioned at the beginning of the podcast. So it's a project where you have been working with 5 pilot cities to test some models to help people in energy poverty. You've been developing social energy players, so different forms of energy enablers. So can you tell us more about Power Up and what came out of it? Yeah.
yeah. So I think the introduction is great. I think just to summarize what's Power Up, the idea of the project was really to bring this social dimension to everything that's energy business today. So today, when you produce energy the standard way, you are an energy producer, you have the distributor, so you are just giving us services, and people can subscribe your service and get the energy from you. And then we just forget that thousands and thousands of people today in Europe, they're not able to really use the energy that they need to meet their energy needs. So they need to reduce their energy consumption because they can't pay. So they're going to heat less their homes, or to cool less their homes during summer as well, or to limit their appliances use at their place for cooking, for lighting. And this impacts the life and health of people in a very strong way. These people are not you and me, and probably not the people listening to the podcast. Maybe yes, but there are a specific types of people that are facing these vulnerabilities. This population, they change over time. And so we need different types of business and strategies to bring this population that's facing vulnerabilities to the energy transition. Today, Europe's trying to do an energy transition, but this energy transition is not happening for everyone. So myself, I can pay an energy provider that's doing sustainable energy, that's like energy cooperative, that's producing energy locally. But these people that are facing an energy vulnerability, they actually don't manage to use the energy they need. So thinking about using a sustainable energy provider, shifting for new renewables, it's not on their priority, it's not on their list, it's not on their minds. So a lot of Power Up mindset was how to design a business that make it possible, that provides equity, provide everything that these vulnerable people needs to be able to take part in the transition. Like taking part in the transition should not be a burden for them. Should be natural. Should be okay. It's just there, a choice. I can jump in the transition as well. So this was a lot what we were trying with these different in these different cities across Europe, with different models and schemes to see how we can do this, how it could work, how it could like be tailored to each locality, and how it could also take shape in a concrete example.
Yeah, and the cities had different starting points, and they were located in different EU countries. So essentially the idea was to make like the energy transition, like using energy locally produced, and something as evident as going to, let's say, the local shop or the local school. So something like the natural choice for people, right? And these places were, please correct me if I'm mistaken, but the one place in Belgium, one in Czechia.
In Czechia, yeah.
Yeah. There was also one in Spain, in Valencia, and the other two, you have to tell them.
Yeah.
And plus, there were also two that were learning from it.
Yeah. So as you said, we had one in Belgium, that's Ziklo, one in Czechia, that's Rosnov, one in Spain, that's Valencia. Then we had Italy, the southern area of Italy, in the Campania area. And then we had, close to Naples. And then we had one in the Netherlands that in Ireland that didn't work, and finally the project then became an observer. And we had another one that's it was in North Macedonia. We in the start of the project we also had tried to do a pilot there in Skopje, the capital of North Macedonia. It also didn't work it out and become an observer, a replicator. So Netherlands and North Macedonia are more replicators, observers than pilots. Then we have like real 4 pilots that went over the full way and that arrived to the end with something on the ground.
Yeah, and they did vastly different project. I found what your colleagues did in Valencia absolutely impressive, not only because of the scale, but because of what they managed to implement, right? They used some of the most, let's say, collective and personal space of the city to then benefit more people. Okay,
Yeah,
so
that's
here,
amazing. Yeah, I can give enter a bit more in the example. I think it links a lot with what we were talking about synergies before.
Exactly.
So it's really existing infrastructure that's there, not being used, like it's being used. So to break the mystery, they installed PVs in cemeteries. So they had a very specific structure of cemeteries with some buildings where you put the ashes and the remainings of people that left us. And these buildings, they have a roof that's free, it's not being used, and the sun is hitting there all the time, every day. In Valencia, it's very sunny, so the potential was high. So the municipality decided to install PVs in these roofs and to use these the energy produced to cover the need, some part of the energy needs of the municipality, of municipal buildings, but one specific share of this energy is going directly to people in facing energy vulnerabilities. So they don't need to pay their energy bill anymore, that they need to apply to receive these, but much more structural than giving only an energy check or a voucher for paying the energy, something that's a punctual add. They enter in a system, they enter in a support system that they're going to benefit for the long that they need to be to receive this support. And it's as easier as possible for them. So the social, the social services work hands to hand to the energy services of the municipality to be able to identify the households that are in need, to recruit them, to explain them how it will work, to build the trust that's needed as well, and to bring them in as easy as that's possible for them. And once they are in, they're just benefiting from renewable energy, from an asset that was there, waiting for a better use.
Yeah, that's really amazing, because that's like the municipality really had to convince the family to do this kind of work, because it's like, of course, it's the most personal and the most you have to do it with so much respect, but they managed to do it, and I really find it inspiring. You don't need to cover lands, you don't need to change anything, make anything complicated, you don't need to displace people or their remains. Of course, you make the most of what is already there, and that is exactly what sustainability should be about. The other projects were a little different, but also very successful. Let's move on to, I don't know, Northern Europe. Let's go to Belgium.
Yeah, so Belgium was a very particular case because we were working in Diklo, that's a city in the Flemish area of Belgium. And the city, they had already for a while been engaged in the renewable transition, and they had bought shares of a wind turbine from an energy cooperative, from EcoPower. And the municipality has been engaged and interested about how to tackle energy poverty in a more structural and systemic way than just with punctual support for the households. And then their scheme was to create a rolling fund to be able to the households to join the energy cooperative that was producing energy with this wind turbine, benefit from the energy without having to pay in advance. Because to enter an energy cooperative and benefit from their tariffs and from the sustainable, from the green energy production, there is an entry fee. If I'm not wrong, for EcoPower, it was 250 euros.
Yeah. Which can be very high for certain people.
Yeah, exactly. For I always like to remind that it's not me and you. It's sometimes I give conferences and people say, it's 250 euros. I can pay, but it's not me and you.
No, exactly.
It's people that can't. Yeah. So then what happens is like that the municipality. So as they have shares of this wind turbine, they allocate the share that they have to this household. They start to benefit from the energy cooperative, and they repay this prepayment the municipality made for them every month over a long period. So they pay 3 euros per month. That's integrated in their energy bill. 3 euros per month goes back to the municipality to repay the prepayment that was done by the municipality. Once they finish this payment, they are owners of their share in the energy community. The energy cooperative, they remain in the cooperative, and the municipality can use this money again to fund another household that can integrate the scheme again. So it's a very innovative way that also makes like social innovation with financial innovation, because you need to make this rolling fund work, but also have been working quite well, even if sometimes you have problems in the middle, like the energy price of the cooperative fluctuates a bit more. So now it's a bit more expensive than the other providers. But I think it's also the challenge of doing innovation. The context change, you need to adapt your solution, you need to be agile. So the city and the cooperative now are looking to install plug-in PV systems in the balcony. So the households, they have also self-production of solar energy, and then they can bridge the difference gap. So the solution that they're going to be benefiting will be the least expensive in the market for them. So they're going to be paying even less than the social tariff usually.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I don't know if we will have time to get into the other two, but the Power Up website is packed with some really interesting, let's say, feedback on what happened and the various business model. It's really inspiring because it's extremely concrete, right? It's extremely on the ground and very you managed to build a team that was not afraid of saying certain things were extremely difficult. So I would like to take a few minutes to reflect on the kind of lessons that you will take away from this Power project, especially about, you said that certain projects had to withdraw from being pilots. So I would like to reflect on what it means actually for the energy sector and for you in particular.
Yeah, sure. I think I start for me, and one lesson that I take back, it's also a bit more broader for every kind of innovation project. I think there is a very important point that you need to find a stakeholder that assumes the risk. In this kind of team, there is always a risk. And it was a huge challenge for us. For example, if we just go back to the example of Eco that I gave, there is a risk that the household will not pay the 3 euros that they are expected to pay every month, because they may have changed their situation, face other vulnerabilities. And so if they don't pay, who assumes this risk? Probably the insurances are in place, they will not cover because they're very specific cases. And then there is a risk, and what we have been seeing, that was the cases that were more successful, is usually a stakeholder that has a public interest that covers this risk. This risk is minor. Probably you can find solutions to cover this risk, but you need this political will, you need this political push to be able to cover this risk. So the local authorities, the municipalities, they are really important in Power Up to be able to cover this risk that a standard commercial actor will never cover. And the same thing when you talk about sustainability or anything that like transition related, there are externalities, and whenever you bring these, like the pollution, the impacts inside the economical systems, either they create costs or they create risks. So we need to deal with it, and you need really to bring everyone around the table and discuss clearly, frontally, how we are going to address this risk. Can we assume it? Can we find mitigation solutions to this? And it's possible, but we cannot hide that there is no risk and that nobody will take care of this. And then I think from a more broad and energy vulnerability perspective, we all of us, the team, learned a lot about how challenging it is to engage with the people in vulnerable situations that are facing vulnerabilities, because they have other priorities. They sometimes have a mistrust in the system, in the public system. Sometimes I think it's also important to think that sometimes they don't speak the language that we speak. They can be migrants. They can have low literacy. You need to adapt yourself a lot.
Yeah.
And communication and engagement has to be something that's not, I'm communicating now at the start. It's something that you start at the beginning and you end after the end. You should keep doing it all the time, because also they need to be informed continuously if there's changing the schemes. I think the engagement, the communication, being close, building trust, building relationships, really, really important for this type of project and initiatives. Definitely.
Yeah. I find it especially interesting that you mentioned this, because when working on the project myself, I found the example of Czechia and in Italy really the most interesting and complex, when it was really about the timing of the communication and the building trust, etc. So in a nutshell, in Campania, it was it's one of the poorest region in Italy. It's close to Naples. The idea was to reuse some of the material and the lands that were already there. There was even a solar power plant that had never been plugged, right? So that was, but still people didn't really show up when there were the kind of presentation of the project. And something equivalent happened in Czechia, because not so equivalent, but the team out there decided to communicate where people exactly were, and not like trying to reinvent the wheel. But they joined some festival and things like that to make sure that people were hearing about the project. So I found it really interesting that they were facing the same kind of problem, and they had to be very creative with the solutions.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think those are good examples. We also face this challenge of sometimes you need to communicate, you need to engage, but you cannot use the single shot that you have. Like if your model is not stable enough, you cannot share something that's not very clear yet for them. So then you have to be creative in the way you engage. The engagement needs to take place. So in Czechia, for example, they really attended their Earth Day festival. They talked with households. They have been promoting also other energy poverty mitigation actions. Also in Valletta, they did a great work. So sometimes they were engaging with the households to talk about energy, but like distributing energy efficiency kits, doing energy audits, going to the households. Sometimes the engagement needs to take place, but not really to talk about the innovation part, but to talk about the basics still. And then you build trust slowly up to the moment when you are ready to launch the model that we're going to test, the pilot, and then everyone is more or less prepared.
It's very much about what the role of a city is in building trust, because trust is something very systemic. Like it's not like a one-shot communication campaign that will bring the trust, but it's more like the reputation that you build over time by showing up, by being present. And that was really also interesting to see how much links there were between the different municipal services to reach out to the people as well. And that's exactly what you mentioned at the beginning, that the fact that whatever happens in cities has to be multidisciplinary and engage people with different viewpoints to find solutions that are sustainable and that benefit people in the long run.
Yeah, sure. I just one example came to my mind. That's a metaphor completely out of my crazy brain. I have the feeling that engagement and also all these pilot innovation projects is like doing embroidery. You do a stitch here, you do a stitch there, you do a stitch here, you do a stitch there, and you need to keep going. And just at the end, you're going to have the full picture. And that like your solution will look like something. But the small stitches you do, like the engagement that you do here, also not only the engagement with the citizens, but also with the different stakeholders, with your social services, with the energy services, all these small connections, sometimes they take time. They take words will be tired about it, but then at the end you are going to see that it composes the full picture and that the small contributions make it work.
I love it. I really love it as, because I wanted to ask you if you had one lever, a rule, a funding condition or mindset, or maybe a shift to make this kind of social energy players and this kind of, actions and project mainstream in Europe. But now you just said it. It would be like saying it as embroidery.
Yeah, see it's an embroidery. Go slowly, step by step, and don't give up because all the pilots, all this innovation. Usually we are working in the gray zone of regulations, moving sands, regulations changed, like in our pilots regulations changed at least 3 times in the middle. Financial, economical conditions change. We also had like COVID crisis, energy crisis in the middle. So you need to keep going, also to be flexible. Like usually you have a plan, and it's a plan. Having a plan is good, but destroying your plan and redoing your plan is also good. You need flexibility to do innovation, to integrate these changes in the green transition. You need to have a plan, but a flexible mindset to be able to deal with everything that's changing. Climate's changing, so everything's changing all the time. So yeah, it's quite important.
That's great. Thank you so much, Eduardo. It's been so interesting and insightful. And I will recommend our listeners and viewers to check the Social Energy Players website. So it's a power project, but it's called Social Energy Players. Because if they want to learn more about the various pilot projects, I have worked on it, full disclaimer, and it's been really super interesting. Like I've really loved talking with the various project managers, like working with Eduardo. And there are so many lessons about how to build trust, how to stay humble, but also take pride in collective work. And about this kind of extremely agile mindset that is not only for, let's say, the engineers planning some technical solutions, but it's also for people who innovate at the social level. So thank you, Eduardo. Would you like to add a couple of things about PowerUp or what it will become?
Yeah, sure. Thanks a lot, Marine. It was a really pleasure also to collaborate with you in this process. So yeah, PowerUp is ending now in 15 days. It's our end, but it's not the end of our pilots. It's not the end of the work energy cities do on energy poverty as well. So take a look on all the materials that have been produced. The final brochure summarized quite well what we have been doing. So it's great. And also, if you want to know more, don't hesitate to reach out to the pilots themselves. They are the real heroes of this history, actually. So to the different cities, whenever if you want the contacts, I can put you in contact. So just reach out and see, because it was the kickoff for them. It was the starting 5 years starting something, and now they're going to run these things that we work at together by themselves. But yeah, I'm sure that there are very nice steps coming forward. And then on a more personal note, I think I discussed with you, but I post this kind of crazy metaphors like the embroidery one, a Substack channel that's called The Modern Human City. So whenever if people are interested in taking a look, don't hesitate to look on my social media for more crazy metaphors and these broader and philosophical reflections.
Yeah, but I will keep the embroidery one.
Yeah.
Might become even the title of this episode. So thank you so much, Eduardo. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you very much.